Welcome back to the What You're More podcast. I'm your host, Quinton Harrison. For all the parents out there, there's no limit to the things that we won't do for our kids, within reason, of course. And this episode, I want to dial into some things that I saw from a study that's been taking place over the last 3 years at savings.com. Savings.com has conducted a survey of over 1,000 parents with specific questions about how they support their children financially. And the children are defined from 18 all the way to 45. And so I want to talk about what are the outcomes of this survey. And this time around, this third year, it got pretty concerning because I really think it speaks to the economy and it speaks to many of the things we've been talking about on the show, from credit card to rent to housing. It goes on and on. But it brought up something to light that I was not really paying much attention to, and it was the sacrifice that you make towards helping your kids against your financial retirement, against your own retirement. And I thought that was an interesting take on this. So let me talk about the approach to this, the data set. I think this is important. So this is a third year in a row, over 1,000 adults with a median age of 57 and a median household income of 50 to 75,000. Now, you guys have heard us talk about median and what that means. So if you have all 1,000 people in here, they just went right to the medium, right to the middle of that. That's the median. That doesn't mean that's the average. So you can argue what's better here, average or median, but that's the median age and the median income. So I'm sure there's more income and there's less income in this equation, but that's what they listed. There's 50% male and female. And the survey was just conducted last month, in February of 2024. So this is real life data, which I think is great. Here's some few takeaways from this I think that were interesting. That 47% of parents provided financial support to their children that live with mom and dad, and 61% of them don't even pay rent or chip in to help the bills, meaning that 47% of mom and dad are helping their kids, but the kid in return is not helping pay rent, is not helping pay for any type of food or expenses around the house. Thought that was interesting because the type of financial support that's being given without any type of help involved in that. Now, one thing to take into consideration in this is that this did not include children with disabilities. This did not include adults with disabilities. So all of that was removed from this survey. So I thought that was important to note as we go through this here. Despite what we're hearing about the improving market conditions, I thought this was interesting because this appears to be ground floor evidence, in my opinion, that there are certain generations that may be hurting in this economy more than others. And maybe it's because they don't have a job. Maybe it's because they have a job that's not paying as much wage as they need to live on. Or maybe it's because they're a college student and they're taking on a tremendous amount of student debt. The list goes on and on. But I think there's a lot of points that could be made here that some of this recovery or some of this expansion really hasn't reached young Americans yet. So the majority of the survey indicated that Gen Z, this is 18 to 27, was the most common to receive parental help. Now, again, I would argue that most of those are college students or students recent graduating high school, deciding what they're going to do with their lives. That could be an argument there, but maybe not so much on the later end of 27 years old. But you can make an argument that if a student's in college and they're living at home, that this commuter aspect is much larger than in this survey than maybe the next generation I'm going to talk about, which was the millennials and Gen X's. So millennials are defined between 28 and 43. Gen X's are defined between 44 and 59. Those two each made up 21% of this survey. Going back to what I was talking about is, of these parents that are helping out, 42% are the age group of 28 to 54. That's not college students. That's full-blown adults right there. So that's something that I consider as, wow, I talk about things we wouldn't do for our kids. If my child's living with me at the age of 46, knock on wood, we're going to have some talks about, you're going to be paying some bills, you're going to be helping out around this house, you're going to be doing some things here. And then this survey, what gets interesting is that, again, excluding kids with disabilities and adults with disabilities, these are individuals that are living with mom and dad that are receiving financial help. And what's interesting is when we break down, I want to break down some numbers here. So of the Gen Zers, now remember that's 18 to 27, they're receiving $1,515 a month per help on average, according to the survey. That's a lot of money. Millennials are at $907. Generation Xers are at $960. This is an average of $1,384. Now, just to put in perspective, if you take $1,384, now that's net income, by the way. That's net income. That's $17,000 a year parents are helping. $17,000 of net income per year that they're helping some of these adult children, if you may, go on with their lives and supporting them financially. That's $17,000 net, which is probably, depending on a tax bracket, let's use that median tax bracket, that's at least $23,000 to $25,000 gross that could be going into a retirement savings account at some capacity that the parents are not able to do because they're supporting the kids. Now, Another thing I want to get into here on this is I just think how much of a huge drain this could put on the economy, because if the parents aren't able to save for retirement, that means they're dependent on Social Security, which starts to become an issue because we don't know if Social Security will be there later on in life or if it's going to continue to be one of the largest strains on the budget moving down the road that we talk about all the time with the congressional budget. So there's a lot of things involved in that I think are a big issue there, and quite frankly are concerning. So what are the parents giving money to? Now, this is the one that's eye-popping. I'm going to put this graph, and it's going to have a huge star by it because I think this speaks to everything we've been talking about on this show here. So let me start with Gen Zers. Rent, 60% of the money is going towards rent. Now, we know rent has been off the charts, and that makes sense to me. For millennials, 53% rent. For Gen Xers, 56% rent or housing or mortgage, right? That makes sense because mortgage costs are high. Housing costs have gone up. This makes sense. And the average monthly amount giving towards all three of those generations, $713. Now, that means that in this particular survey that the parents are saying, hey, I'm going to help supplement your rent or your mortgage on average by $713. That's crazy. It's not crazy that the parents are helping with that. We've all been in challenges in our life where we help. I'm just saying that's crazy, the amount of money that's being given to help out with that, which bodes the question, if rates come down, if rents come down, is that going to be as necessary? I don't know. Is it also going to take maybe higher wages to help out with that? Probably as well. The other highest point on here was healthcare insurance. I thought this was interesting because I believe you can stay on your parents' healthcare insurance to the age of 26 or 27. Clearly, the Gen Zers are going to have the highest weight on there, right? Because they were at 67, and then as you get to millennials, it's 19%. But I thought that was interesting as well, that you're seeing kids stay on their mom and dad's healthcare longer because healthcare insurance, if you're unemployed, is going to be relatively expensive, but if you're employed, maybe your employer doesn't have a great benefit. So I just thought that was some good things to point out. And there's other things on there: cars, student loans, credit cards, all the things you expect. Now, here's one that I didn't expect: the amount of contribution that the parents are giving towards vacations. That's the one that blew my mind. Wait a minute, like back up. Like we recognize that we've got some financial challenges. You may or may not be living at home. We're giving you some rent money to help out. We're stroking some mortgages, and we're going to give you money for vacation too. Like, to me, that's the one that was like mind boggling on here. Like, I'm sacrificing my own. I don't know about you guys, but my parents, my dad would wring my neck if I'm like, hey man, I need help with rent. Oh, by the way, I'm trying to go down to Cancun. Can you break me off some help here? My dad would have been like, absolutely not. I couldn't even imagine or fathom the conversation that my dad would be having or my mom would be having with me. But then I think about my kids, and I'm like, I would absolutely erupt. Remember Donald Duck? For those that you watch Disney, and many of you still do with your kids, but you know how Donald Duck, when he would get so infuriated, like the red would start and it would rise up until the feathers shot out of his head. He'd be so mad. That's where I would be if my son or daughter came to me with that concept. I would do that whole thing and just be like, lose it and go so upset, just lose it. That's my best Donald Duck impression, by the way. When my kids were younger, it was like the greatest thing. But now they look at me like, why are you doing that, Dad? But anyhow, that the leisure and vacation hospitality, you're like, what in the hell is going on with that? But anyhow, the thing that we go on through with this here, there's some other things in the survey I want to talk about here. So also you see that there's a lot in this survey about the parents saying, listen, we're helping our kids because they were recently laid off in the last 12 months. This was interesting because the highest portion of layoffs took place in the Gen Z population. Now, that's interesting to me because I think if you're 18 to 27, you're probably getting your first job, your entry-level job. You might be working retail. You might be working food, F&B, laid off in the last 12, and the parents are helping with that. That makes sense to me. Like, I get that makes sense. Not so much on the millennials or the Gen Xers side of things, but here was the stat that I just was like, man, you talk about you'll do anything for your kids. This is the stat that really says it right here. The 47% of that same group had the parents themselves. One of the parents had been laid off in the last 12 months and was still offering financial support after being laid off to one of their kids. Like that is, man, that's tough. And you got to commend that, right? That is very tough. But the thing about this that kind of jumped off the page here is that in 2023, the survey from last year, not this year, survey from last year, parents' survey stated that they were sacrificing their own financial security to help their kids was at 36%. That jumped to 58% in this survey. So in 2023, 36% of the parents said they were helping their kids but sacrificing their own financial security That jumped to 58% in this survey this year. That's a scary stat because, again, it goes back to what I was talking about with the economy and retirement and things of that nature. So this last part of the survey here really puts some things in perspective for me, because it was like, hey, as the parents, this was one of the questions. Which of these would you be willing to do to support your adult child or children? And let us know which one apply. Top one is that they're living a more frugal lifestyle. I think that all makes sense. If you got to make sacrifices, that's what you do. But this very close to the top one, this was the one that was like a gut punch. I'm pulling money from my savings or my retirement to help. So not only are you not backfilling your retirement, you're pulling money from your current retirement to help. That is a tough one. The third one was even just as tough, and it's right in line. You probably know where I'm going with it. I'm taking on debt to help. And we talked about, where's this debt coming from? Could be coming from your home, could be coming from credit cards, but a lot of this survey starts to add up to some of the credit card debt and things that we were talking about. And this is just 1,000 people. So compound that times the millions of people out there, you see where we are right now versus maybe some of the data we're getting about this healthy economy. And so I thought that was really important and extremely eye-opening. And so as the survey wrapped up, some things I took out of conclusion from this was that there is a clear challenge in the economy. Like, it is clear. And I know that there are all signs where the haves and the have-nots are there, but there is a challenge. There is a challenge going on, and it's not just generational, it's multi-generational. The rising house costs are not just affecting future home buyers, but they're impacting current home owners as well, even if they're locked in, because if they have kids that can't go rent because the price is too high, or they can't go buy a house because the home prices interest rates are high, the parents are having to help subsidize that. And that's not healthy for the economy. I think some of the COVID spending habits are still in place. Let's go back to that vacation situation I just talked about. Like, you're going to take a vacation, but you're getting help from mom and dad to help pay your mortgage or your rent, and you're asking for them to help subsidize the vacation. That, to me, is a little bit of the COVID, like, hey, I earned this. I have the right to do this, or I got accustomed to doing this. There's a lot of still COVID-isms out there that are hard to break, and we've talked about that on multiple episodes. I think that the economic forces that are out there are impacting all ages. And I can go back to that multi-generational thing. It's not just one generation it's impacting. And I think the strain on the parental retirement funding is going to be a bigger issue than just, maybe sacrificing a couple of months of payouts, because we're talking about in the later years of your compounding of your retirement. And if you're pulling money out and making $17,000 a year to help pay and help your children with all the expenses we talked about, that is an issue. And that is a big deal, to the tune of $1,386 on average per month. And again, I'm not taking shots at anyone. I don't know your situation. I'm talking about the survey and exactly what was on here and some of the things that jumped off the page to me. Every person's situation is uniquely different. Every person has the right to do what they want to do. All I was stating is that there is a savings.com study that has been going on for the last 3 years, and it's somewhat of a concern just from an economic standpoint, but more importantly to me, I think it screams what we've been talking about on the show as far as rent costs, credit card situations, housing costs, and interest rates, and ultimately affordability. And the thing that it pointed out to me was it affects all age groups. It's not just one age group. And that was one of my major takeaways, was that how it impacts all age groups and not just one. And that's something that I haven't seen in a case study thus far. And I appreciate savings.com putting that out there. If you guys like what you're hearing, please go to our YouTube channel at What's Your One More. Charlie will have all these graphs in there. And if you're a podcast person, we're on every single platform you listen to. Please 5-star review us. We'd love to see your comments on there. The stuff you guys are putting online kind of feeds us to do future episodes. We're very excited about episode 150 that's getting ready to come up here. And again, appreciate everything you guys are putting out there for us. Till the next time, we'll see you at What's Your One More.
I got one more shot, I'm gonna make it. One more chance, I'm gonna take it. I meant it when I said it, now it's time for me to do it. I got one life to live, so I put my all into it, yeah.